My name is Nicole Morin Scribner. I'm a volunteer with the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center. Today is Thursday, October 14th, 2021. And today I have the honor of interviewing Theodore Truman, but do you prefer to go by Ted?
Ted.
Okay, I have the honor of interviewing Ted Truman. We are interviewing him in his home here in Scarborough. Also present with us is his nephew, Milton Truman. So thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today. And I usually like to start these interviews right at the beginning and ask you where and what year were you born?
I was born in 1929, December 11th, 1929. I'm the first American in the family. His father, my brother Paul, was born in Constantinople. Now it's called Istanbul. And my father decided to come to America to seek his fortune, and he came to America, and while he was gone, the atrocities were going on. The first Holocaust was 3 million Armenians were slaughtered by the Turkish people. Why they picked on Armenians, I still don't know. Jewish people and Greek people. I guess they're the ones that owned the businesses, and they were the sweep the streets and servants and whatever. And I guess they got fed up and said all these foreigners own everything. And so they decided to have a Holocaust. And when my father heard about it, his father, Paul, was just a young boy. He came back here and took his father, Paul, and my mother, and they fled and went to Athens, Greece. Then shortly after, my brother Jim was born there, and then my brother Plato, they named him right. Plato was born there. So the three brothers were there, and my mother was pregnant when my father decided to come to America with his wife and 3 children, and a pregnant wife. I was born maybe 5 or 6 months after they arrived. So whenever I got mad at my brothers, they said, "You bunch of foreigners, go back to where you came from." I made it by about 5 months. And then after, there's 3 girls. So there was 4 boys in a row, 3 girls in a row, and he died he was about 50 years old. Sad, but he died working, and he didn't take care of himself and all that. And so my Uncle Louis, who was his partner, and my uncle, sort of took over the family. We lived upstairs. In fact, you got the picture of the building?
Well, yeah.
They owned the Puritan Tea Room in Biddeford, right on the corner. And in the back of it, I can talk till the cows come home.
Yeah, so, she only asked you what your date of birth was.
I know. See what happens when you hear me start.
That's okay, all right.
And in the back was a little balcony with a player piano. So they used to start the player drums, or piano, I guess it was. Anyway, they decided to move up the street, and they bought a 2-tenement building, and the biggest project of its time in Biddeford, and they jacked the whole building up, put the stores downstairs, and then a cellar and it eventually became a bowling alley. And he died when he was 50, and my uncle, his brother, partner, died 4 years later. They were 4-year distance in age, and they both died. And it goes on from there. But we lived on Birch Street. They finally moved us out of the apartment up there. And that's where we lived for years. And so that's a start.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and you answered one of my questions, because I know that you identify, or maybe you can explain, you identify as Greek, but your parents were both born in Turkey.
But they were Greeks. They were Greeks, Armenians, and Jewish people. that owned all the businesses in the area.
Okay, so
They were not Turks.
So they were Greeks, but they lived in Turkey.
Yes. When Constantine the Great or whatever came and he conquered all the islands, and some of the soldiers, some of the people stayed and lived in Turkey or whatever. And but they were Greek Orthodox.
I understand.
Yeah.
So going from there to Greece to Biddeford?
Biddeford, Maine.
Why Biddeford?
Why do most of them? No, they can't. They couldn't. My father and my uncle spoke 5 languages: Greek, Armenian, Turkish, and so forth. But I think what happens with most of the so-called foreigners, they don't speak. My mother went to French school. They spoke all the languages, but not English or American. So where am I now?
Well,
the reason he went to Biddeford is, and this happens a lot, I believe. They know someone, a cousin, a friend, that can put them up. Where are they going to go? They don't even know how to go look for a room. So they put them up and they stay with them. And that's why they came to Biddeford, because he had friends, relatives, someone, and they gave him a room where he could, and so forth.
Yeah. Pretty much what happened also at that time period when the Italians, the Greeks, the Armenians, so forth and so on were migrating to get to this country.
Yes.
They were looking to work. They were young men looking to work.
They wanted to work.
So at the time, the big area to go to actually was Lowell, Haverhill, Lawrence was the areas, and the other part was Rochester, New York, because all the mills were there. But my grandparents were told, don't go there. The jobs are in this other town that they knew that he was talking about are in Biddeford. So those guys headed this way because they were looking to work in the mills, and that's how they got their start, working in the mills. That's how the beginning was.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did your parents do for work when they were still overseas?
They
were merchants, but really...
no, my grandfather and granduncle were very young when they came here. They were only 17 years old.
Right.
So they were going from there where there was no opportunity to come here to work in the mills.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great opportunity,
right.
They thought.
And then working in the mill, his father and his uncle had a milk business. They delivered milk around the towns. They had a little district they would take care of. And then from there, they started their first market on 4th Street. So they went into the grocery business. So the first store was on 4th Street. The building's gone now. It's just a parking lot next to Grady's. There. Mm-hmm. That was the first store. And then they expanded after that. Like the Puritan, like my uncle was just saying, was his grandfather's place. It was called Puritan Confectionery. It wasn't Puritan Tea Room yet. He sold it to Milton Moses. And Milton Moses took over, and that's where Uncle was talking about the piano playing gizmo up in the back.
Oh, God. Yeah.
But then it was candy and ice cream. And the floors, to this day, the floors that his father and uncle installed, which were imported from Italy.
Little tiles, a beautiful floor.
Yeah. And there are just a few places left in Biddeford that still have that tile. But the biggest one was to put in Thronumoulopoulus Market on the corner of Alfred and Poole.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we leave that, so those floors you're talking about, what would be the business today where you could go and see those floors?
The first one that's gone completely was, of course, Thronumoulopoulus Market. The other one was the Puritan building itself, which is now the Chinese place. The Chinese place.
Chinese first, yes.
Happy Dragon.
Happy Dragon. As you first walk in, the tiles are still there.
Same tile. Exactly.
In the St. John's building, for whatever reason, they purchased some of the same tiles, but it's in a little. It used to be a barber shop where St. John's is. I believe the floor is still there. And there's one more on Alfred Street. It used to be Juliet's and Yvonne and Juliet's.
Yeah.
the floor was also installed there. So it was
really?
installed in a few
Yeah.
places there. Yeah.
So I think
It was very beautiful tile. It was
Oh,
not-
gorgeous. Little, small
Yeah,
tiles.
yeah.
Beautiful.
So your father, before he came to Maine, had been working because he had a couple of children and what have you.
No.
Did you know?
No, he didn't have his children he married my grandmother in 1920. So he was already here working. He was almost twice the age of my grandmother. So he left, he was in the States in 1909,
Okay, so when you say
my grandfather.
your grandfather,
His father. Yeah.
Okay, but I thought that his father, your grandfather, came to the United States when Plato was born.
Right.
No, he wasn't born yet.
Oh,
No,
when
Plato
was
was
born
born-
in Greece.
Okay.
Yes.
What happened
They
was,
were-
not to
Just
interrupt
that
you.
his father was the only one born
Yeah.
in Turkey.
In
But he was a Greek.
1920, 1921, there was something called the Great Catastrophe. It's all in the history books. And the Greeks they made a deal with the Greeks and the Turks and Armenians and so forth, that they had to leave Turkey or they're going to be in big trouble. So they made an exchange in 1920 and 21 that the Greeks would leave and the Turks that were there would like take control, but the Turks elsewhere had to come back also. It was like an exchange. Didn't work out that great. You know, the loss of lives of the Armenians and the Greeks
Yeah.
and the others were worse than even the Holocaust with the Jews experienced.
Yeah. The first one was they supposedly slaughtered 3 million Armenians.
Right. Yeah, they did. It was horrible, but you don't read about
So
it.
the Armenians,
so much.
and I don't know why they picked on
Well,
the Armenians. but-
the Armenians defended the border where the Ottoman Empire
Oh,
was coming
okay,
into,
okay, that's
which
why.
our family also was from.
Yeah.
From the
Right.
higher mountains, which they went to Trabzon and Ordu eventually. They were in a place called Gushman, which in Greek was called originally Agriopoulos.
Yeah.
It was a mining town, but it was like the capital of the area. They migrated to Ordu and then to Constantinople. My grandfather goes back to marry my grandmother. Has his first child in 1921. After that, my grandmother and my father went to Athens. My grandfather brought them there. And that's how the rotation started. Then my Uncle Jimmy was born in Athens, along with my Uncle Plato. And then shortly after, she gets pregnant with this guy, but gets born in this country. So he's first generation, as I'm first generation, because my father was born there, right?
So
Right,
I
correct.
wondered when they were even in Greece. I'm trying to see what did they do for work.
I'd say they
there?
worked in mines or worked as merchants. They were just kids, so they didn't have a real job at 16
Right.
and
They were
17.
young. Oh, yeah.
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 The age difference between his father, and the next one was like 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandfather was the oldest one, but there were a lot more in his family didn't make it. You know.
Well, that was another question that I was going to ask is, did you keep, as you were growing up, did you keep in contact with people in Greece to keep the connection?
Well, we had relatives there.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, that's another story. My mother got this letter, and before my father left with my mother and his father to come to America, and they bought a small lot, just a little house lot, and I think he paid like $500.
His plan was he went and bought that lot in Athens. Remember now, they're going from Turkey to Athens. He was hopes with eventually he would move
Come back. Yes. When his children were older now, he thought he'd come back with my mother, his wife, and live happily ever after. Well, number one, number two, three, whatever you want to call it. My mother now has a washing machine. She has this, she has that. And her children were now Americans, most of them. She's not going back to Greece. And the time went on, and my mother got this letter from this man. He was an architect builder, and he wanted to build a small condo there. And Plato being Plato says, wait a minute, I was born there, I've never been there. And he went over, met with this guy, and he says, well, you know, I got brothers and sisters, I got to talk with them. Look, he says, I got 1 week or 2 weeks to get my papers in. I can't fool around. He says, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I want to build 6 apartments. 2 penthouse apartments I'll give your family. And anyway, that's how, and we went for years. We went back. We all did. His father, I did, my wife, and we'd go back for like 6 weeks and spend it in Athens. And anyway.
Yeah.
That worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, tell me about what it was like growing up in Biddeford. What was your childhood like?
Work. I used to go to the store. I went to Biddeford High School, but at recess time I used to come and take all the cans. I'm a precision kind of guy, and everything had to be
a fanatic.
A fanatic, actually.
And the store he's talking about now was originally Thronumoulopoulus Market, that became T Brothers Market, which eventually you might have remembered as T Sisters Market.
T Sisters, my sisters
which
took it over.
Which is where Northeast Bank is on that corner, that whole section there.
And I would go in and I would move all the, they were half full, the shelf. I'd move everything up, turn all the labels showing, and when you came in, it looked like they just, just opened the store up. And then on Saturday, I used to have to come, and my father saw the war coming, and he bought feta cheese in small little barrels. My job was to roll the barrels every week, and all little things. And
how old were you when you started working at the store?
Well, I was one. Yeah, well, it was we were owners. It was Paul was.
They were probably working at that store by 7 or 6. They were in there. That was because they lived upstairs.
We lived right
upstairs
in the corner.
There were 7 kids, and my grandparents in a 2-bedroom flat place, and they lived below. And that's what a lot of immigrants did. That they worked downstairs and they lived upstairs.
Lived upstairs.
Yeah. So that's from little kids. They were in that little store.
But I was, the kids all went to school.
Yeah.
I stayed with my mother, and I couldn't speak English. So I did things, and my mother was an exceptionally clean person, and I learned from her that, if this is not straight, I'm gonna turn it. Everything has to be, and that helped me when I went to Maine Maritime Academy. I went to sea for 10 years. I've been around the world completely 10 times. I've been to the North Pole, the South Pole. I've been through the Corinth Canal. I've been through every canal in the world. And so what I learned from my mother and working with my brothers and everything, we were workers. It was nothing to work all day long from 7 in the morning to midnight. And
they were importers of fine foods from all over.
Yeah, well, the one that was a very fancy store was SS Pierce in Boston. They had different labels: red label, blue label, and the red was the best, then blue, and so we had the agency for SS Pierce, and people from Kennebunkport, very wealthy, the Bushes, everybody would come there and buy. Because we had sort of the franchise for it. And
how did you learn to speak English?
That's a good question. I went to school. I stayed back the first year. Couldn't speak. I couldn't keep up with it. Eventually, all my friends went to second grade. They stayed back. I caught up with them. And from one thing to another, working in the store and behind the counter, listening to the people talking and so forth. And I learned,
So one of the, obviously the Biddeford area, especially during those days, there was more than one nationality.
Probably 75% were French Canadians. They came down looking for work. They migrated down, Lewiston, so forth, in Biddeford. They only got paid because I remember we cashed their checks on Friday. Their checks were about $15, $16, and they had 4 or 5 children, but they were always clean and, they're just well-mannered, so forth, so on. It was a French town. There were a few Polish people, a few Jewish people, and some Greek people. Greek, Turkish, whatever, but mostly Greek.
As you know, it was quite a mixed bag. Albanians.
It was a mix,
And those groups, for the most part, not for protection against the other group, but would band together a little bit because they needed they had the, if you were Orthodox, whether you were Armenian Orthodox or any type of Orthodox, you were part of the Greek Orthodox, and they all had the Greek church.
On Emory Street.
Emory Street, 1919. Yeah, that was established in 1919. And that neighborhood was also Emory Street was like Greek town and Italian town and Jewish. And they because they had some of the same foods that they ate and stuff too.
Right.
So they sort of like stuck together because. And even when I was high school, when he was in high school, it was the same way. You made friends with others too, but you tend to stay with your own. It was just that way.
We were foreigners.
We were foreigners in their town because they dominated the town.
Yeah.
As they dominated it in politics too, for all the years. Yeah.
So with regards to your culture, your language, your traditions, what are some that really stick with you?
Tell them about the bakery.
Oh yeah, next to the Thronumoulopoulus market was Robochel's bakery. It was a French bakery. Closed on Sundays. Now, I don't know if you know, the Greek holiday is the biggest of all. Bigger than Christmas, bigger and
Easter,
my father and my uncle had keys to go next door, and they got permission. There was a bakery there with the ovens, like pizza ovens and bacon ovens. And so on Sunday, or before Sunday, there was lamb. It was the big meal that my father, my uncle would take orders for a whole baby lamb, or a half a lamb, or a 4/4, a lamb head, a lamb brains. That was a delicacy, and with scrambled eggs. And so they would give my father, my uncle, the order, and they would go to the church and then come back. Well, my father and uncle would go in at 2 o'clock in the morning and start baking all the lambs. They would buy spring lambs, nice little baby lambs, very tender, and they would cook it all. So the Greek people, this is wonderful. When they got out of church, they came over, and, oh yeah, you want a half a lamb, a half this, that, and they'd wrap it in this white meat paper. They also, Rice's Bakery, are Jewish. They used to deliver bulky rolls in these big bags that were delicious. Fresh in the morning. The Italian bread, for some reason, they never delivered anywhere else, but they had to deliver on 7 days a week, and that's when the store only closed twice in 50 years. Yeah. Twice. When my father died, 4 years later, my uncle died, the store was closed. But in 50 years, in only 2 days, it closed. And
of course, one story leads to another. But everybody in town, and George is Italian.
Oh yes.
But George Latakakis actually got his start with these.
Well, he got out of the service and looking for work, so we hired him, Plato and I and Jim. And
they made bulky.
We were making with a bulky roll, a nice Jewish fresh roll. They brought them every day, and we made a small Italian sandwich on a bulky roll. Well, George came in, very good worker. Wonderful man. Yeah. And he came to us one day and he says, I love working for you boys and you treat me well and all that. He was making the sandwiches out in the big, long counter. Oh, and back there was an ice box, not a refrigerator. And the man would come in with a big block of ice and put it in the middle. And it was open, so they kept all the meats, whatever you had in there, cold. And George was doing that. A wonderful guy. And one day he came up to us and he says, you know, Ted Plato, whatever. And he says, you know, I enjoy working for you. You treat me and pay me as well as you can, but I like to go in business for myself. And there was the Thronumoulopoulus building. Then we had another building going up Pool Street. And there was a Jewish Neiman. He slaughtered animals, you know. And he had just moved out. And he says, I know you got an open store there. And he says, I'd like to rent it from you. And we said, yeah. Normally he's going to go make sandwiches and compete with us. No, we said, go ahead. In fact, we had a little sign at the counter that mentioned that if you want a long sandwich, go around the corner to George's. And that's where George first started. I told that to the family there one day a few years ago, and that's where George's sandwich first started. And then they moved to Jefferson Street, where they are now. And what else?
So you helped him start that?
And that's how
definitely.
Yeah.
That's where George started. Another thing, my father had passed away, and my uncle saw the war coming. And he was sort of like the buyer. He would go to Europe and buy products from all over Europe and so forth. And I remember him buying 50 cases of Norwegian cross-pack sardines and feta cheese. And he bought stuff that lasted through the whole war. But what he did, someone would come in, do you have this and that? And we'd have it in the back storeroom. But unless he was a good customer, if he was, he'd call me over and say, go get this, put it in a brown bag and bring it over. So the good customers got whatever we had that you couldn't get anywhere. The war had come now. There was none of the European foods available. We had them in the back room.
These guys were smart guys. They were very diversified in the products they had to sell.
Yeah.
Because not only did they take care of those people who were immigrants from those particular countries I mentioned with the Italian foods and everything that they were importing in, but family, like he mentioned, like the George Walker, who was George
Walker Bush.
George Bush's grandfather, would bring them to the store because they had caviar and they had stuff that you couldn't get anywhere because the uncle was always thinking ahead and would go to Europe and buy all these things, and they always had these big varieties.
Practically the whole year, all the years of the war, we had product that nobody in America had, and the Bushes and this and all, very wealthy from Kennebunkport. They'd come down with their chauffeur, and the chauffeur would open the door, and they'd stand by the door waiting for their owner, their boss, or whatever you want to call them. And and then we were SS Pierce. We had the SS Pierce line, which was the cream of the crop, and that's where a lot of it started.
Now, what was the impact on you do you remember during the Depression? Because you lived through part of that. What do you remember from that?
Well, he was little.
Oh, I was small.
You were small.
I went in and I swept the street, the sidewalk. Oh, we had an awning, and the sun, and we sold a lot of farmers sold us fresh corn, and we had watermelons outside on a little stand, and we got to be sort of experts on pick. They'd come up and say, Ted or Paul or this, would you pick me out a good watermelon? And we knew how to go and tap it. If it was real hollow, that was a good one. And the heavier one, the better. And they relied on us to go out and pick out stuff. And
during his period of that, you mentioned Depression and even Prohibition, these guys were creative all the time, and they weren't the only ones doing it. My grandfather would have watermelon over here, beautiful sliced fresh watermelon, and that would be 5 cents. But he'd also have watermelon over here for 25 cents a slice. Well, you ask why the difference? This one would be full of vodka, and this wouldn't be. They made their own stuff back then. They got by. They had those skills, or someone taught them how to do those things.
they were hard workers, and like
They worked
I said,
themselves to death.
They only worked. They both died four years apart, 50 and 54, and it was sad.
I mean,
but they were very
yeah.
hard workers. They all spoke 5 languages: Jewish, Greek, Polish, French, and I can hardly speak English. And they spoke all the languages. So whenever some ethnic person would come in, you felt that, gee, he's paying attention to me. How does he know all the languages? And
But it wasn't always rosy.
no,
It wasn't all rosy.
It wasn't
Yeah.
rosy.
Yeah.
So you said your father died young. He
Yeah,
worked
50 years old.
and he
He
worked.
smoked. He smoked.
He
all
smoked
the
a
time.
lot. They all
He
smoked.
was a 300-pound guy. They just worked, ate, and slept.
That's all they did.
And all 3 brothers, the oldest was Peter, and then Louis, or Panayotis, Lazarus, and the third one was Chris.
They brought him over. He was
He
the
was the
younger brother.
guy. He was the younger guy in the
Yeah.
thing. But they all died at about the same age.
Yeah.
Smoking.
They didn't take care of
They
themselves.
just
They
worked
all
all the
smoked.
time. Yeah.
In those days. And then we sold a lot of checkerberry snuff. In those days, a lot of people would smell this checkerberry. We sold a lot of bromo salsa. They got upset stomachs, and they'd come in and with soda water,
soda water,
and
because they had a big-
stir it up.
Here's an example,
Yeah.
Nicole. Well,
Oh, yeah,
this was the
there it
store
is.
here, and it had a big ice cream sundae thing. They had everything in that store.
And then his father actually ran that for quite a few years.
Yeah, my father was a little bit on the wilder side
Yeah.
of the group because he was much older than
Yeah.
the rest of them. So
And he was handsome,
he
and
was
he had all the good-looking women.
he's by the way the Truman driving school guy.
Did you know about the? Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
do you know I tell more people about my brother Paul? He bought this 5 and then thought he was crazy. He built his home there. Had a very good builder build it. He had the school built with all glass, so if you drove by, you could see all the students up there. But the thing I says, my brother was so smart. He developed the whole thing, stop signs, curves, the whole property. You had to pass his test there before he let you drive on the highway. So when you got out on the highway, this is a piece of cake. I do this all the time in Truman School.
My father was in Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yes.
He was young. He was in the Philippines.
Yeah. I
He
think
got-
Pearl Harbor. Can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
The war broke out. So 2 or 3 of the boys were going to go down, sign up. Whether they want to go to Hawaii, the hula
Yeah,
girls.
yeah.
Then
Well, they were
everybody
surprised.
chickened out, but my brother Paul, and he was sent to Hawaii.
Yeah.
And there's Dyer. What was his name? The reporter.
Oh, Dyer.
Yeah,
Ted Dyer.
Ted Dyer. Told believe it or not, man, he says,
Ripley's.
believe it or not, by Ripley. And they interviewed Paul, and he was on Believe It or Not by Ripley, Polycarpus Thronumoulopoulus, the longest name in the United States Army. Well, he started getting letters from girls everywhere. They wanted to marry him. I had a picture of him. He was a very handsome guy. And but that school, I've told more people how unique. I said, I don't know of any school, driving school, that has that same concept. And he had a lot of flair, and he loved automobiles. He had the franchise for it wasn't much. For Tucker Automobile, that's the one that had when you went around the corner, in the center there was a light that went around
lights
the
would
corner.
turn in with it.
And it was automatic. There was no automatic cars. This had everything.
He wanted to do things different than these guys. These guys stayed in the store
right. We
and did very well. My father was more. He was into cars. He had an automobile called the Playboy. Which was you're just a little girl, Nicole.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know those things. Yeah. But he branched off and did different things. These guys stuck together.
Yeah,
and,
right.
But the
three
difference
brothers
that he
stuck
was
together.
allowed, the
Yeah.
difference that my Uncle Ted was allowed, they wanted him to have a better education.
Yeah, I was the first one to go to higher
He went to Maine
education.
Maritime. He was in the Navy. That stuff you can tell him about.
Yeah.
But he got a full education,
Yeah.
and they made sure that he was going to stay there and get that what he needed. You know.
And I do want to go there, but I did want to ask, because you brought up Paul and that he was at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, when they bombed Pearl Harbor.
So, do you remember how the family felt when you
Yes,
heard about
yeah,
that?
oh, yeah.
So
Well,
tell me
we were
about that.
sitting by the radio. You know, you had these little three-way, two-way, or whatever it was, and they were listing the dead. Well, they bombed Pearl Harbor. I mean, they really bombed Pearl Harbor, and we didn't know whether he survived or not for days or weeks. We didn't know whether my brother Paul, his father, survived it. He did. And then from there, after being there, they sent him to the Solomon Islands, and he was there, and he got malaria there. And I remember when he came home, he came to my mother's father, uncle, they all had died, and I saw him sitting there, and of course he had malaria, and he was shaking, and oh God, it was a terrible sight. My brother, my oldest brother, he
had that
idol.
He had that as the rest of his life.
Yeah,
He'd
yeah.
have those shakes, and it was like frightening.
But,
But then they sent him to
Oh,
Germany.
to Germany. I mean, some
I
never
mean,
left the United
Give
States.
the guy a break.
Give him a break.
They sent him to
then they
Germany.
sent him to Germany. My God, this guy's been all over the place
And
and
those,
survived.
he was in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he finally ended up in France at the end of the war. But that was,
And in those days, how did you stay in contact with them?
Well, we really didn't.
I don't think you did.
No, I don't think we did.
a letter here and there
Yeah, very.
to his mother saying, I'm okay.
Yeah,
don't
I'm
worry."
okay.
They all did that.
The communication between families wasn't that easy back in those days.
I think you have an interesting story about the Andrea Doria. When you were
Oh,
in the-
yes,
yeah.
yes. I worked first for Onassis. Onassis was the richest man in the world. He's the one that married Jackie Kennedy. But most of the merchant ships were built by the government. The war came, they built all these ships, and they went off. And then, now that you're done with it, you don't want it. The government didn't want them back. What would they do with all these ships? So they bought them for $500,000, which is nothing, and different companies were. But Onassis was the richest man in the world by far, and he was the biggest ship owner. He had 350 ships, and so my first job at Maine Maritime, they placed 98% of all the cadets graduated. Now you can go to Harvard here and there, and your parents pay thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you come out and you say, gee, what do I do now? You don't have a job. Maine Maritime, they place 98%. They have a job for you when you think. So I didn't know. Onassis? Who's he? They flew me down to Norfolk, Virginia. There was it must have been 200 ships out there, didn't have crews. So I went aboard, and so when I went aboard, the ships were waiting to get some crews to get going. They had a cargo in there, but no crew. And I came over, I got there at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I says, my name was Thronumoulopoulus then. We shortened it from Thronumoulopoulus to Thronumoulopoulus, and I was the first one to change it to Truman, but that's, I might get there, I don't know. But
the name
when
was
I came
Thronumoulopoulus.
aboard,
It was Thronumoulopoulus.
Thronumoulopoulus.
And then Thronumoulopoulus, as you might have remembered it a little bit. No, not really. No.
My father wanted to be Americanized, so he cut off the Poulos. Now he's Thronumoulopoulus.
Yeah.
He's an American now.
Yeah,
See?
right.
But when I went aboard, and I said, Lieutenant Thronumoulopoulus, he said, what? I said, Thronumoulopoulus. He says, okay, Smitty, follow me. They called me Smitty all the time I was on that ship, and I worked for Onassis. What an experience. I'll tell you, I was so lucky. I've been all over the world. I've done all these things as a young man, traveling, meeting different people, aboard ship here, there, and everywhere. I got an education that 10 people, probably 10 young men, will never ever have. See, that's why I said I can tell you stories till the cows come home, and that's true.
Now, why did you pick going to Maine Maritime after high school?
Well, I was graduating. This Coach Hocker, but he was originally born and everything. He was a old Orchard Beach fellow, and he was the coach up there. And 4 of us made all-state football and all that. So he came down to interview us, to recruit us to go to Maine Maritime. And I said, Maine Maritime? He says, yeah, we pay you $65 a month and clothing. 65.
They paid you to
go to school.
$65 a month was a lot of money.
I said, 60. That is all the money in the world. I never had $5.
Yeah.
They
didn't get paid much.
Yeah.
But they ate.
They
A roof
us.
over their head.
And I didn't have a car, so weekends I would stay at Castine and walk the town over and see the town and so forth. But at least I got a good meal, and I was brought up as a military man, sort of. And then I went because they sent me to Victor Carriers was the name. He bought 20 ships, all Victor Carriers. Those were fast ships, steamships. Most of the ships were the old up and down. You know, they went maybe 15 I'll say it in miles, 15 miles an hour, where the Victory ships went over 20. And those were, beautiful ships. But they didn't want the ships back. The government, that's why they practically sold them to these owners. And Onassis bought a lot of them, for a few $1 million. And he became the richest ship owner and became also the richest man in the world at that time. That's before Jack.
So you were an engineer on those
Yes,
ships?
yeah. And, why did I become an engineer? I used to sell bananas and apples on Alfred Street. What do I know about engineering? But all the football players and the regular guys, I thought, were all engineers. And we made out that senior year what we wanted to do. You took half a year of deck and half a year of engineering. Either you're down in the engine room or up. My ranks for engineering, I didn't know anything about engineering. So they called me in, and I forget his name. Anyway, he says, "Gee, you do very well with the math and whatever it was." He says, "Your marks, I don't know. I don't think you can make it." I said, "Oh no, I'm going to study hard. I'm going to blah blah blah." Only because I wanted to be with the boys, the engineers, football players, and all that. The other guys were kind of. And so I didn't. I went out, and I stuck with it, and I did all right.
His class was around the time of Nick Poley, who Poley's Market. Art Dakota was a little younger than him.
Yeah.
He was part of that group. Lloyd LaFountain,
he was a year behind us.
Him. That was that period of.
Yeah.
Nathanson was a little bit older. I mean, those are the names that are kind of familiar to the people that's still in town.
Yeah. But let me back to the high school. Biddeford hadn't beaten Thornton in 33 years. Our senior year, the coach, we were 9 seniors and there was 9 games. He allowed each senior to be the captain on the field, and we beat them 33-0. It was unheard of that, and we had quite a football team. For 3 years we were undefeated at Biddeford. Yeah. So anyway,
that was Coach Keeney.
Coach Keeney. Yeah.
Now, after you graduated from Maine Maritime,
I went right to work for Onassis. Yeah, I went on board the ship that was waiting for a crew, and we sailed right away. And we would go over with a full. They were loading coal. because in Europe, all the coal, the factories were bombed out. So they didn't have any material. So they were looking for this fine coal so they could blast it into furnaces like oil. And that's what we were carrying. Wherever the money was, that's where Onassis sent us. He sent us to the Far East. He sent us all over the world. But we'd go over now. The ship was full, and it's down low, and it was riding good. But coming back, there was nothing nothing. So we're bouncing all over. And we came out of the canal, and all of a sudden, the captain started to go due south because there was a big storm, big storm. So he thought, well, I'm going to go south and get away from the bad storm, and then come around, from the Carolinas and come along the coast. Well, the Andrea Doria was the pride of the Italian fleet. And it was SOS was sinking, we need help. That Andrea Doria was their pride. All paintings, the famous Italian painters, everything. And we wanted to help, but we're trying to save ourselves. So we went 200, 300, 400 miles due south, and then turned around and came up. But we always went over with a full load and came back empty. Boy, I've been bounced around a long time, and many times I didn't think I'd make it.
Well, the point, as you know, the Andrea Doria sunk.
Yeah.
A lot of people died.
Oh.
But there's no way that ship could have gone back to help, because they would have perished in the storm. That's just another.
Yeah.
I think they lost 800 people or something.
Right
off the Carolinas.
That was a tragedy.
Yeah, right off the Carolinas.
So that must have been a bit of a transition, like you said, selling bananas on the corner
and then
store, and then you're
end up as a chief
world.
engineer. Traveling all over the world.
What was that transition like? How did you adjust?
I was a very
you were broad-minded.
yeah, well, no, not that isn't what I want to say. I'm a fanatic in cleanliness and what I do, and like I say, my wife would put something there, and when she's not looking, I'll make it straight. Everything has to be in order, and that's what I used to do. I learned in the grocery store. Yeah. Come over, bring all the cans up, turn them so the all thing.
So he took his military experience and brought it to the Cascade, and and the kitchen was like you were coming onto a ship. The captain was on the ship. It was super clean. You could eat off the floor. And all his experience from the grocery stores to the military to the merchants transitioned to.
We used to feed 1,700 people a day at Cascades. We had 110 people with us, 55 cottages. But I'll tell you, the help were wonderful. But if you worked for me, I didn't say do this, do that. Can you clean that up? It doesn't look good. And they knew I was a fanatic for cleanliness, and they all really, I sound like a boasting, but they adored me because we would close. When we bought the Cascades, it was only open 6 months a year. So I says to my wife, Norma, I said, 6 months a year? They can't make a living wage. They're going to have to go and look for a part-time job. I said, we're going to make it 9 months a year and close New Year's Eve with a New Year's Eve party. We had a big orchestra and bar and everything and dancing and the whole thing. And we served our Sunday brunch. We didn't want them to go out and kill themselves. So they ate very, very well before they left the building. And then we closed the next day and we asked the help to come in. We gave them their last check and we always gave them a good bonus. So we were like family, I'll tell you. And when we reopened, they'd come and they'd hug me, and it was like part of my family. It was my family. But I used to have the cooks, everybody, clean your station before you go home. We used to close at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And then I used to have a man come in at night and clean on top of the clean. And he worked all night. I'm leaving at 11 o'clock or so. I'm leaving to go home, and the cleaning man was just coming in, and I'll be back at 5 in the morning, and he's just finishing. And I say, all right, Spot, go, have you had any bread? No, go and make yourself a fried egg or something. And yeah, it was family, I'll tell you. They all stuck together, worked together.
I read an article about the Cascades that talked about the reason behind the name for the Cascades.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, the Cascades originally was 60 acres on that behind the building. Oh, it was built by 5 businessmen. That was a farm. The whole front was where they grew vegetables and all that. And there was a house and a big old barn. No nails in the barn. It was all done with wooden pegs at 60 acres. 40 acres on the other side. There was a flea market or something. They had tables out there. But they sold that while we were negotiating. We should own that. But anyway, the Cascades was a 65-foot natural waterfall, and all the ice and everything coming down the rivers and everything would go over that fall and go all the way to Pine Point and out to sea. And what they did is there was a small little building there, and they had hibachis, and you come over there and you could buy ice cream or a hot dog or something, cook it yourself on the end. They had a little hibachi you could cook yourself. And then there was a bridge over the falls, and you could walk over and see the water churning, and especially in season when everything's melting up. And some wise kids came down and burned down the bridge. But what they did is they stocked it with fish, trout. They dammed it, slowed it down, and they stocked it with trout. And if you came over there and you rent a canoe, and if you caught a fish, you bring it to the Cascades, and they used to pan fry it for you free. A lot of history there. There's a little mine out there. There's a lot out there in the back of the Cascades. People have no idea how much was there.
I think I read it used to be an Indian settlement.
Yes,
where the Cascades were.
Yeah, and it was a shame. Oh, now when I bought it, people the food was lousy. Everything before we bought it, and people never even they drive by the Cascades. They wouldn't even look over there. So I said, you know what we're going to do to catch their attention? I put the yellow aluminum roof. And then they had just had a little sign, a little small sign. I had a 25, 30-foot big sign with a marquee on it and the whole thing. And we're over 9 months a year. And but the crew made the Cascades. I got 2 hands. How much can I do? I asked them. I never gave anybody orders. I asked them, would you do this? Would you do that? And
what?
I rebuilt the whole kitchen, new
you
automatic.
You never gave orders?
Well, not really. I mean, not in the sense like.
No, I know what you're saying. I don't, but yeah.
Everybody's got a name. I may be the boss, but I'm no better than you.
That's true. He would do anything that anybody else had to do.
I washed toilets. I cleaned
everything.
floors. Yeah. If the dishwasher didn't show up, Sunday morning, we're packed with 1,000 people Sunday morning brunch, and the dishwasher hasn't come in. I'm in there washing dishes.
There was a silent film motion picture done there in the
right. There was a Indian. They built a couple of cabins up there.
A cup of coffee or a cup of tea or anything.
Whiskey.
Huh?
Yeah.
I don't even have that.
I'm okay right now.
Okay. Alvin, no.
And there was a movie with these Indian, a couple of little things there, and they used to hunt and all that. Way back there, they made a movie out of that. And then with the falls going over with the trout and bathhouses you could go. and rent a canoe and a lot of history. There was a small zoo over the bridge. On the other side was all flat, and there was the bear cage is still there. Huge bear cage is still there. And they had little monkeys, and they had small deer and all that. And then the monkeys, they used to take and house them around the furnace. We left and went south for the winter, and they the janitors were stoking the fire. They had to keep from the pipes bursting and everything. So they had the monkeys all around near the furnaces.
That was before he took it.
Yeah, before I took it. And they got
But he's
smart.
got a monkey story afterwards.
Yeah. So monkeys are smart. They saw how the guy opened the door and put the food in. So one opened it and then opened all the others. There's monkeys running all over the building. They were chasing the monkeys.
But why don't you tell about your monkey, or Plato's,
Chico.
Plato's monkey.
My brother Plato went to Cuba with a friend. He came, how he got it over here, I don't know.
Now, you couldn't do that now, obviously.
You couldn't
Bring a
do that.
monkey from Cuba. We're talking early 50s,
And
late 40s or something. Yeah.
so he brought this monkey home, and
Now-
my mother got stuck with it, so she put a blanket over the radiator as you came in the house on Birch Street.
This on Birch Street.
Yeah, and he slept on this blanket, doubled up and all that, and it was in the kitchen. At least it was warm. But next to it was an ironing board, and my mother would open it and put the iron would come down. Next thing we knew, he's got the iron, and he's running back and forth on the ironing board, but he loved to eat cherries. They're supposed to be dirty, but my mother would give him a
This
couple
was a
of
clean
cherries,
monkey.
and he'd put it down and take another one.
Believe me, for my grandmother to have a monkey in her house,
Yeah.
he had to be a
And
clean
she was
monkey. Yeah.
like I am. I learned all the cleanliness and everything had to be spotless. And that's how I ran the Cascades and how I've run whatever I've done in my life, I guess.
We
it's
won't get
fun.
to the demise of the monkey. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So I'm going to actually take a step back.
Go ahead.
And after you went to Maine Maritime and then you worked for Onassis, you joined the military, I believe.
Not yet.
Not yet. And
no.
how did you get into the
Yeah.
military?
The next thing, the ship had gone to the Far East, and they were supposed to, I was home while it went to the West Coast, and they were supposed to call me and fly me down to where my ship was coming in. Well, the office was off that weekend, but he didn't leave a note to call me. The ship will be in tomorrow, this and that, and we'll fly you to your ship and all that. Well, when I called, my bags were packed. I knew when they was coming, and I called. I says, "What's the story?" He says, "Oh, gee, we forgot to call you." He says, "We can get you there just about the time it sails out. But if we send you there for nothing, if you're held up in an airport, we're sending you for nothing, you'll have to catch the next ship." I said, "I don't want the next ship. I love the captain and the crew that worked there." And so I didn't go to work for Onassis. I went to work for Isbranston. Isbranston they were American, Norwegian people, but they were American. Every 2 weeks, they had a ship going around the world. Every 2 weeks. Now, the beautiful thing about that, we could only carry 16 passengers on any ship, cargo ship, merchant ship. Only 16, that was Coast Guard regulation. Well, these were the rooms that the officers had during the war. So they slept, whoever was on that ship was next to me and so forth and so on. And and you know what it was? To go around the world with you, your boyfriend, your husband, whatever, or alone with a friend, $1,250, 4-month cruise around the world, 32 different ports around the world. Now, let me say this, the beauty part of it. You got to Singapore or Hong Kong, anywhere. Say, oh, gee, you know, it would be nice if we could get off and go and see you could get off, no extra charge, we were never full, and catch the other one coming 2 weeks later. Every 2 weeks there was an Esperanza ship, and that's where I sailed and saw most of the world because of Esperanza. Onassis, it was straight to Europe, back and forth, get the cargo over, come back, and bounce around with no cargo in the ship. So I decided, you know, my brothers, I was a partner with Plato and Jim, and Paul had started his own business. And so I said, it's time for me to go back home. So I stopped Merchant Marine. I got there, and that summer, I'm having a great time. All of a sudden, the only time they could call me is an emergency. Okay, so I'm home having a great time, going to the pier and this and this and that. That was the real pier then, and so all of a sudden there was a ship, the Whack-A-Mole. It was a big. We carried 130,000 gallons of oil, gasoline, jet fuel, the whole thing. Well, the chief engineer came down with the appendicitis. They had to take him out. Now the ship is ready to leave. They have no chief engineer. So they said, well, we got to find someone so that we can get out of here with this load of. And that guy Truman, he's got a lot of experience. They sent me a telegram. The next morning there was a chauffeur at our house, and he drove me straight to the ship. I went aboard and we left, and I was 2 years a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. Yeah.
So you were in the Navy and you didn't do like boot camp? Or?
No. I had training. I was
Maine Maritime.
I was
Merchant
Marine. I was
sure,
no boot camp or anything like that.
Ah.
And then finally I came home.
Yep.
But you
and
served,
that's when I bought the Cascades after.
Now you served in the Korean War.
Yeah.
So you were physically there as well.
Yeah. Trying to think of the ports. There were so many of them. Yeah.
So people don't talk about the Korean War.
No,
much.
that's a dirty, because of what happened there. And
so tell me your perspective on the Korean War.
well, I'll tell you, I don't know that much about it. I used to go up I forget the river, in the merchants, and we used to bring cargo. Ambulances, ammunition, guns, everything for the side that we were favoring, and we'd go up. What's the name of the river? Well, anyway, and you'd see little kids on both sides with machine guns, because if you weren't the right people or whatever, the enemy, they shoot you down while you're coming up. So, but we went up and we brought all this cargo and stuff and came back. So they didn't let us go too many places there. We brought the cargo and then we left and
It was
went
a
back.
supply ship and stuff.
Supplies.
Supplies to get.
So it really, but it was. I'm going to go off the story a bit. When my brother Plato ran for Congress, the people in Biddeford said, well, what about the Korean War? He says, well, all I know is what you know. You read it in the paper. He says, but if I'm elected, I will go to Korea and I will come back and write the whole story about Korea. So he didn't win, but he went to down to Washington, got a permit to go around the world and go to Korea. He had an interview with the Pope, and from there he went around and he ended up in, what was the big hotel there? Well, anyway, he was there, and when he came back, he wrote the story about what he thought of the Korean War. But no, he was there more than than I was. I wasn't allowed to go ashore because they shoot you or whatever if they were the wrong side. But
So,
he did something that most people would never do. You didn't vote for me, to hell with you, pardon my English. And but he says, win or lose, I'm going to go to Korea and then write. And he wrote a whole page in the paper.
Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam. Yeah.
Yeah, that was later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did see, since you bring up your brother Plato, that you worked very hard on his campaigns.
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us something about his service? And
Yeah. Well, he was. Where was he stationed? In Massachusetts? Where was he stationed?
Plato?
Plato.
Out west. He was
Out west somewhere.
Midwest, yeah.
He and his father, he and I were co-chairman and promoting my brother Plato. And what they did, he should have won. What they did, dirty politics. They're dirty on both sides. I'm not a lover of politicians. All of them, not all of them. How can you be there for 50 years, 60 years? Sure, speech writers, they have a chauffeur, they have a bodyguard, they eat on us every day,
Well,
the gymnasium,
There
the
were
whole
several
bit.
campaigns that
Yeah, so...
they were part of that.
yeah.
And the one that he was in charge of was the one for Congress.
Yeah,
The first one was the U.S. Senate. And that was a very close election when he was running against Margaret Chase Smith. A guy named Judge Elmer Violet, defeated him by a very short margin. And partly the thinking back then, because they ran another guy from Portland to take away his votes, and his name was
his
Smith.
name was Smith.
His name was Smith. And they're running against Margaret Chase Smith. But anyway, he only lost by 1,500 votes.
Yeah.
And then Ted took over the campaign for the Congress. And it was just tough times to try to beat the incumbent, who was Peter Kairos at the time. Mr. Kairos was part of the Union, very strong, and the Union were very strong during that time period. It just didn't work out. Yeah. And Plato, for his love of politics, kept running.
Oh, he loved politics.
He just loved politics, and he wanted to do good things. He did. But
He really did.
I mean,
he wasn't looking to go and make money. But what we'd like to see, it'll never be done, term limits. You go in 2 terms and you get out. Years ago, when this all started, the farmers would go for 2 weeks, fishermen would come for 2 weeks, but you didn't make a living and stay there and have a speechwriter and a chauffeur and a bodyguard. Well, I mean, all these people, look at them all. It's 50 years, 60 years.
Well, you can tell them you were in the state legislature.
Yeah, I was in the
Ask you about
legislature.
that.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience with that.
Well, I lost money going. And Plato says, you got to go and keep me informed. What he was running for Congress. And keep me informed. I said,
Plato went in first, and then Ted wanted to serve after that. And Plato
he
went
told
back
me, he
to
says,
running the family business but he did both. He was in the family business. I think he met his beautiful wife the same time period you were. No, a little bit after.
After.
That's right.
After when
I'm going the wrong.
Yeah.
Shortly after. Yeah.
But I don't have a good word for either side. Why are you there 50 years, 60 years? And then there's lobbyists. They're all now. They go in as average wage earner, or whatever you want to call it, and come out multi-millionaires. Where did you get all this money? You only get $200,000 a year, whatever. I don't like them.
What was it like when you were campaigning?
Oh, his father and I did the campaigning. We went everywhere, and we were actually a little flashy, can't speak English. And we did things. We had buffets. We this and that, and we did things that. Well, that's the way we are, and we're givers. And Paul and I had a good time doing it. In fact, there's
Politics was different then anyway.
Yeah.
Politics was fun.
It was fun, man.
It was fun, and you knew all the the players to begin with.
Yeah.
You might have served with them. You might have
Yeah.
lived down the street. They still got along. I mean,
Yeah.
it was not like
That wasn't.
it was just during that time period you make believe you will, and then after that
You got the
still
one
be
that
friends.
shows Paul.
Plato.
No, Paul and I. Your father and I on the campaign.
Well, here's one.
Is that one?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm going to take a picture of that and include
Oh yes,
it.
yeah, there it is. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
So, something that you brought up, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. So, tell me about your beautiful wife. How did you meet?
There you go.
Okay, you asked for it.
Yeah.
I always went to Florida. I was working in the seasonal stores with a family. So, everything slows down, mostly in Old Orchard. And I used to tell Jim, he had 2 children. Hey, you got 2 children, they got to go to school, you got to stay here. I don't have to stay here. There isn't enough business for me to stay and you stay and so forth. So I used to go to Fort Lauderdale every year for 6 months. So then I was in the doctor's office and I saw the Mark III Lincoln Continental. They hadn't made that car for 15 years. Had a spare wheel on it, beautiful automobile. And so I went to Swearingen Motors, that's who owned the Lincoln, for the whole state. I says, Mr. Swearingen, I'd like to put my order in, I was in the legislature, for one of the new Mark IIIs. Mark III? He says, there's no such car. I says, well, I've read somewhere. Listen, he said, every car Lincoln that comes into Maine, I have a commission. He says, I should know, shouldn't I? I says, yeah, I guess so. He says, well, there's no. I said, will you do me a favor? Put my name down. 2 weeks later, he calls me up, Mr. Truman, can you come in? I have a video here I'd like to show you. I went in there, and there's the Mark III. And so I was first one to buy the Mark III. Beautiful car with spare wheels, and oh God, it was so okay.
John Martin.
John Martin offered $1,000 more. $1,000 was a lot of money back then. I only paid I paid $10,000 for this car. Beautiful car, $10,000. But everything is relative. He offered them $1,000 more to get the number 1 car, and he said, "Listen, Representative Ted Truman already signed. I promised it to him, and then her older brother, never should have bought the car. She bought a canary yellow Mark III for their mother, who was an older woman, and the 2-door cars got a big door. I mean, she should have had a 4-door car, not 2 doors. So, okay, let's get to Fort Lauderdale. I lived 6 months every year at this apartment, 2nd floor. For years, 10 years I lived there as a bachelor. And one day my nephew Louis, his brother, he called up, he said, Uncle Ted, he says, we got exams coming, and he says, everybody's out partying, drinking beer, and raising hell. He says, I can't study here. Can I come down and visit with you and stay with you? I said, well, come on down. So he came to my apartment. I said, that bed is yours, and that bed is mine, and that. We got up that morning, went to Wolfie's, was a Jewish deli restaurant, one of the best. Eggs, pastrami, it was wonderful. It was right around the corner. I said, I said, Lou, we're going to have a nice breakfast, you'll see, at Wolfie's. We went, and we're coming back now, and all of a sudden we're coming down the street, and around the corner 2 blocks is where I lived, in the apartment. And I see this canary yellow Mark III with a flat tire. I slowed down, and main plate. I said, Louis, that car's about 2 weeks old, and it's already got a flat tire. I just slowed down, nobody in it. Good luck to you and your flat tire. I went around the corner, came back, but something told me, go back and see who it is. They're from Maine. So I says to Louis, get your suit on. We were not even a block away from the beach. I says, I'll catch up with you later. I'm going to go see who these people from Maine in a canary yellow car, which I knew was number 3, 4, whatever. So I get there, I look inside, nobody in the car. I look, and it's, for $10,000, they put my name, this car made expressly for Representative Ted Truman. This car made expressly for Mrs. Herbert K. Smaha. They owned Columbia Supermarkets. They were bigger than Hannaford then. They were the biggest.
They were the major league grocery
anyway,
store.
Then I looked up there, and she was with Mrs. Taylor, who her husband was president of Hannaford. They were good friends, and they had been out for breakfast. And I see a couple of women. They're in the hotel, big plate glass, and they're going back and forth. You could tell they were very upset. They went in to call AAA. So now all of a sudden, I don't know, AAA pulled up. So I said, well, that must be the people that are from Maine. So I went up, I grabbed the door. Just about then, they saw the AAA truck. And I opened the door, I says, Mrs. Smaha? Why would I know her name? Well, it was made expressly for Mrs. Smaha. I opened the door, I says, Mrs. Smaha? She says, yes. I says, I'm Ted Truman from Biddeford, Maine. Well, that's nice. And walks right past me as if I'm from AAA. Go fix the tire. What are you doing here? So I'm left there holding the door, and the two ladies go. And I said to myself, I could be on the beach now. What the hell am I doing here? So I went over. I'm starting to get in my car, which was a beautiful car, black cherry, whatever. It was a very unusual car. So she saw me leaving. She came over. She says, "Oh, young man, I thought you were from AAA." I says, "Well, I came to help, but no, I don't work for AAA." She says, "What are you doing here?" I says, "Well, I live 2 blocks down the street." "Oh," she says, come and see me, and we'll have coffee some morning." For 3 months, I had coffee with Mrs. Smaha every month. She drank out of the old diner mugs, black coffee. I'd be there, we'd talk politics and business, and then I would leave. You know, what am I doing?
They thought she had a young gigolo there, whatever.
Well, the word got out. This guy had shorts, just a little white hair here, but, I'm on the beach every day, well tanned. And they said, that the word got around, they said, this guy comes in every morning, and he's there for half an hour. He must be a gigolo. He goes in and services for half an hour, and then he leaves every day. I was the gigolo. But anyway, she didn't tell me about her daughter. She worked for Eastern Airlines, was a stewardess, and when they closed up, she went to work for AT&T in the big office in Boston, I think. So anyway, she was going to come down and visit her mother on a break, and she never told me. She says, finally, she says, "Ted, when are you leaving?" It was the end of the period there. "Oh," I said, "I'm going next week." "Can't you stay a little longer?" Nellie, her name was Nellie. Nellie, we became friends. One of my biggest fears is, what is my future, if I had one, mother-in-law going to be like? Because you hear these stories how they break up marriages, their daughter, their son. So I says, "Can't you stay another week?" "Nellie, I've been here all winter. I got to go to work. I mostly old orchard, seasonal." And I says, "What's the big deal?" She says, "Well, my daughter's coming down, and I'd like to have you meet her." I said, "I got to go. I'm sorry." But the company sent her down on business a week ahead. So I get a call. She never called me. So I get a call. "Ted, are you coming over for coffee?" I said, "Nellie, don't I always?" "Oh, no." She says, "No, I just wondering." Norma came in the night before. She was out sun in the south. You had to come up these steps, and there was a patio, and then a door into Nellie's apartment, her mother's apartment. So I come up the steps, white shorts, good tan, fairly good looking then in those days. Anyway, so I come up the steps, and she sees me go in her mother's apartment, and I guess she probably heard the story of the gigolo. I don't know. So she came over, and now I'm sitting down. Nellie has the coffee for me, and then I saw a teacup. I said, wait a minute. 2 coffee cups, yes. What's the teacup? Norma drinks tea. So all of a sudden, the door opens, and Norma comes in. And Nellie says to me, oh, Ted, I want you to meet my daughter, Norma. Came in, and she says, what are you doing tonight? I says, I don't know. I'm getting ready to leave this weekend. Well, she says, I had the supermarket send me down some nice steaks. I'll cook a couple of steaks, baked potato, and so forth, and we'll have dinner together. She says, I'm sure you don't have anything in your apartment, and you'd have to go out to eat. I said, oh, yeah, okay. I came over. We had dinner together, and this and that. And then I took her for a walk on the beach, and we talked. And then I left. And all the time that I was going back to Maine, I was thinking about her. I said, she's a nice gal and all this and that. So when she got back, I called her, took her out. We went out in Boston somewhere. And that started it all, But it was...
and here you are, how many years later?
Over 50 years later, yeah. With the same woman. But see, I had no worries about my future mother-in-law because we were buddies. I mean, we talked politics, business, this, that. She was like a girl my age, talking like I'm talking to you. And 6 months, people said, you got to get married, because some of them get engaged and then they break up. I said, listen, we set the date for November 29th. I have a business to run. Day and night, Old Orchard, da-da-da-da. When the season's over, then we'll have the wedding. Her mother, it was at the Eastland Hotel ballroom, raised, the head table was all raised. Norma's there greeting the people coming in, and there was a songbird in a little cage chirping away. First class, prime rib, open bar. It was really something. And then we couldn't. Where's my car? The kids took my car and hid it and decorated it all and all that. Finally, I got it, and we drove off, and we.
Was it done according to Greek traditions? Did you have Greek food?
No.
No. Do you still honor Greek traditions?
Yeah, I do. I've been pretty good. I've made money and I've donated to the church.
Back then, though, the same as my marriage, you had to get married twice back then.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. Go ahead.
Because back then they didn't acknowledge. Now today you can just get married in one church.
One church, one day.
But back then you'd have to get married like in the Greek church first, and then the biggest ceremony might be at the Catholic church afterwards. So you had you got married twice actually.
The Greek tradition, you go around the altar 3 times, and we went for some reason. They didn't count right. We went around 4. So Norma says to me, what's this for? Don't they know how to count? And then, so we had the wedding, and the next night we had it at the cathedral in Portland, way up on the hill, the big one there, and in the Catholic church.
Where you and your family have had so many businesses, what was the impact when, like, all the mills started closing? Were you here or were you traveling during that time?
No, I was here. And, we were open 7 days a week. And I used to play football in the daytime go home, have dinner at 5 o'clock or so, and come down at 6, and I'd relieve one of the brothers that was running the store. And now 11 o'clock, the mills are letting out, and we would stay open until they all came up, and I'd go down, look down the hill, all the way to the mills there, and Puritan and all that down there. And when nobody was coming, I closed up, and you get the hell out of there.
But wouldn't you say by the time when the mills started to close
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
you were on to other businesses. That was beyond that period.
When the mills shut
you
down
had to,
completely.
you were on to your
Completely.
restaurant and
Yeah,
you were
oh,
on
yeah,
to
yeah.
motels
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the sisters kept running the store.
Then the sisters took it over, and it was T sisters.
So that was that time
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if it wasn't for eminent domain taking over that
Yeah,
building,
that
it still
was-
might be there today.
That was
That's another
bad.
story. Yeah.
So they took that building by eminent domain to straighten out Pool Street, and that was they took the 2 buildings, all these stores, 2 buildings, apartments, the whole thing, and I think they only paid my mother about $125,000.
Yeah, it was-
that was
What happened to that family was
Yeah.
actually he got 3 times he got taken by eminent domain.
That's right.
The first one was the Biddeford Post Office. His father and his owned that where the Biddeford Post Office
Yes,
is.
that's right.
And there was
That's
a bar there called Walker's Cafe, who actually was run by Mickey Walker. He was a famous boxer, Mike Saran's grandfather and John Saran's grandfather. So they took over that property first. And then they took over another restaurant he owned in Saco called the Hitching Post, Eminent
Oh, wow.
Domain, and then Eminent Domain again on Alfred and Pool Street because those were properties were like prime spots. But you got 3 strikes on those.
Oh
things.
yeah, that one was a bad one.
So another historical thing that I don't, and just share whatever you're comfortable
Yeah.
sharing is we're living through one right now with COVID.
Yeah.
And how has
Well,
that impacted
I
you?
had, at about 5 years of age, I had scarlet fever. All these white, my whole body was white flakes, and 50% of the kids that age died. There was no flu, vaccinations, or nothing. And my poor sister Alice, the only one that's still living, she lives in Lowell, her family, her husband died, but she's got a couple of wonderful sons. In fact, one of them, Peter, is vice president of Merrill Lynch in Boston. And I was quarantined, and they gave me their bed, my father's bedroom and mother's bedroom. So when you first came into the apartment, right on the left, he had that bedroom because he'd come in late at night after he closed the store, wouldn't disrupt anybody who was supposed to be sleeping. And we were 4, and the boys were, I think we were 4 in one room with a double things. But anyway, and all of a sudden, and I never had a toy. My mother, my father never gave her any money, and she had to go into his pocket when he's sleeping, and she bought this metal Constellation plane, the propellers and all that, and my mother, I never had a toy. Wow, man, she thought I was dying. And then all of a sudden, Alice sneaks in, jumps on my bed, and I'm going, and my mother came in, and oh, my poor little girl, she's going to die, because I had said, and the scarlet fever was a big, big thing. And, but it worked out all right.
But the question comes back to the time that COVID, in the last
no,
couple of years,
yeah.
you guys were very strict. You couldn't do much,
Yeah,
but
right.
stay here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, during that time period in the last couple of years, you couldn't go out much. Friends couldn't visit you as much.
right, that's right. Yeah.
You were pretty limited.
yeah.
Okay, so starting to wrap this up, one of the questions that I had is, so you got to see the world, but you came back to this area. Why? What brought you back here?
My family, and we were close. I remember, like Thanksgiving, we'd be running Thronumoulopoulus Market, and we'd say, all right, you go up and eat. And my mother, on Birch Street, next to Birch Street School, across the street was St. Joseph Girls' School in St. Louis. and she'd cook, plenty of the whole table full of food, and then you guys with the brothers, you go, and then come back and let us go, and then that's how we went, and
So family.
we were
brought
very
you-
close,
Yeah.
very close.
And then the last question that I usually like to ask is, what would you like people to take away from hearing your story?
Well,
Well,
I always treated someone that I want to be treated the same, especially at the Cascades. I washed dishes when they didn't show up. I washed toilets, everything, and I never told anybody to do anything without asking. I may be the boss, but they're humans, and I never threw my ownership of the great back then. Never told someone to do something I wouldn't do myself, and I was a super, extremely, everything had to be clean, and I love people, and you treat them like you'd want to be treated yourself.
Is there anything else you want to add? I'm all done with my questions.
No, whatever you ask, I'll try and answer it because I've lived it. I'll think of some stuff after you leave, but no, I've had a great life, very wonderful life, traveling all over the world, through every canal, here, there, and everywhere. I've met people all over the world, and thanks to Branston, Onassis, we went there, dropped the cargo, and come right back. And wherever there was money, that's where he sent us. And no, I have enjoyed my life, playing sports, playing. The Biddeford people were my people. One thing my father had. Money was very tight. We were cashing checks $15 a week. And they had 5 children, but they were always clean, polite, well-dressed. They didn't have any money, and my father and uncle both he took very few charges, but a few people around the neighborhood he would charge. And Friday when they got their checks, my dad, my uncle never lost a penny. So the French people and us were very close.
I think like any grocery store back
Yeah.
in the day, you ran into contact with a lot of people. I don't
Oh
care
yeah.
who it was.
Oh sure.
You'd have to, if you needed some bread or something on Sunday or some milk,
Yeah.
the
Yeah. We
store
were
was
open
open.
7 days a week. Don't forget.
It was a big deal back then. The big markets weren't open on
We
Sunday.
we could have
That's how they survived.
we could have closed another day, but we were open 7 days a week.
There was a lot
They-
of markets. I mean, there was every corner that had a market.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's everybody knew the Thronumoulopoulus brothers because we were open 7 days a week, and if they wanted something, we had it. When you came in the store, there was a long counter, and there's little windows with the different pastas, and they'd say, "Well, I don't know what that is called, but give me a pound of that." But the Italians, see, there was no packages of pasta, so they came in long. And if you weren't, don't you dare break it. For the average person, you'd take the thing and you'd break it and put it together and then wrap it with the thing there. Boy, don't you? They want it long. They're Italian, and this is the way we eat it.
There was one other question that I thought of. So tell me about your name.
My name. Oh yes. Okay. So my name was Thronumoulopoulus when I went, and that's when they called me Smitty for the 2 years I was on Onassis. They called me Smitty, and I traveled all over the world. And they said, "What? What's your name?" Then I had to tell my life history and all that. And I came back. I told my brother, I'm changing my name. I says, you guys, everybody knows Thronumoulopoulus brothers. But I says, I've traveled everywhere when I tell my name. What? How do you spell it? And I had to tell my life history. I says, I'm changing it. They thought I was crazy. I says, look, I don't know, Ted. I was going to change the short, Ted True. But True didn't sound musical, romantic. So I don't know why I picked Truman.
I think part of it was because in the early 50s, Truman was also, they adored in Greece.
Yeah, oh yes.
And it seemed to be a right fit.
Yeah. So I changed
for them.
Yeah. I changed.
My father was the last one to change.
Yeah, they all changed after I did. We went to the judge of probate, $15. They changed my name. That's it. I got papers that tell Thronumoulopoulus to Truman.
I think it was mostly because of the business reasons.
Yeah.
It was just easier.
Yeah.
But you know what?
Yeah.
It's not that easy. People say today, what's your name?
Yeah.
And I'll say, oh, like Harry.
Yeah.
Who was he?
Yeah.
They don't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, let me tell you. So Norm and I, we lived in Fort Lauderdale. We went down. It was a cold wave coming in. So we said, you know what? We've never been to the Key West. Let's go down there. It's 100 miles south. It must be a little warmer because the motels then had a little grating. You turned it on, it was electric coil. That was all they had in the motels. They didn't have heat and air conditioning, all that. So anyway, we're down there, and we get there, and we're freezing. I said, Norma, let's get the hell out of here. We went all this way to keep warm up. So we started back, and we're in Key West. As we're going by, we see, and we says, gee, we better get breakfast. She says, well, Sunday morning, it's going to be tough. We're going to have to wait in line. I said, so we'll wait in line, that's all. We went over, and there's about 25, 30 people waiting. And so I went down, and I put my name in, Truman. By the time I came back, Mr. Truman, your table is ready. Norma says, what you do? Give them a big tip or something? How can, they're all waiting and we're gonna go right in. We forgot. We had our breakfast. We started to go and we saw Truman Avenue where the Truman where he lived. Oh, they thought we were relatives of Harry Truman. And so anyway.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your
Thank you
story.
for coming to see
I've
him.
left a lot, but I go from one story to another, and I can't help it. But
You've got
because
a lot
I've done
of stories to tell.
I've done so much. Yeah, when I used to get up, I was at the club we belonged to. Every year, anniversaries, I would have about 50, 75, 100 people for dinner and all that. And then we always had a big woman with a big guitar, cello. We had the magicians. We had all kind of stuff. And the last one we did, I says every year most of the people are the same ones we open bar, everything for them, and I paid for it. And then I said, usually I have some kind of entertainment. This year, I'm the entertainment, and I start talking. Well, when I start talking, as I said, I can tell you stories till the cows come home. And you know how Norma tries to get me off? She goes like this. That's her sign. When she starts going like this, shut up and get the hell off it. So we've had some, we were lucky.
That's not the figure I use.
Yeah, well, all right.
Yeah, thanks.
This one.
Yeah.
So, but we've had some good times. We've done a lot of things. We were lucky. Oh, yes. Okay.
Teddy, I don't think she wants to know about you. I think she wants to know more about Biddeford.
Okay, well, I can't help it. I'm on this thing. But we did something that only 200 people in the world have done.
What's that?
The Concorde airplanes, there was 2 left. They were going to finish them forever. Okay? So I heard about it. I went down and they said, well, we're sold out. The one in Miami. It was sold out. I said, well, can I put my name in? He said, listen, we got the money already. It's sold out. 100 people. There was an astronaut on board, and there was an open cockpit. In fact, I have the picture of the big cockpit. Open doors and all that. Caviar, champagne, the works. Anyway,
And the worst seats in the world.
the what?
Uncomfortable.
Oh, terrible. Because it only took 4 hours to get to Europe. There were uncomfortable seats, and the portholes were about this big if you wanted to look out. So we were finally, we didn't think we were going to be on them. All of a sudden they called us up, Mr. Truman, you still interested? I said, yeah. He says, well, if you can get a check down here tomorrow, today, whatever, you're on. So
Don't forget your phone.
I'm getting
so they said, okay, we're on. We were on TV. I had a red jacket, black pants, and a black shirt, and the cameras were there as we were going up the gangway, and we got in the plane. Only 100 people from here and 100 from New York, 2 planes. We traveled twice the speed of sound. So the pilot, captain, whatever, he says, we can't put our afterburners on. He says, but when we get 3 miles away from here, we're going to put them on, and don't get scared. You're going to feel a jolt. And then we took off, and we were between, one plane was on this side, one on
Halley's Comet.
Halley's Comet was going, and we chased it all the way to South America, twice the speed of sound, turned around, came back, and we were at a little over 65,000 feet, and we looked out. I had goosebumps on top of goosebumps. You could see the whole world. You know what it is to be up there?
It was very exciting.
It was very exciting. They gave us 2 at a time, go down, meet the astronaut, and so forth and so on, and look in and see the pilots and all that. I have a picture of it over there.
Wow.
And so they were 2 of 200 in the world that ever chased Halley's Comet on the Concordes. So that was
so much I never could put a new rug in our apartment. We had to wait the next year.
Yeah, she was supposed to get a new rug. I said, forget the rug, we're going to do this. And anyway.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this off.
Yeah.